Too little, too late from the Detroit Tigers in their effort to come back after falling behind 4-0. They dropped this one to the Minnesota Twins. Minnesota ends a 5-game losing skid. We talk about it next on this edition of the Locked On Tigers POSTCAST live on Locked On Sports Detroit.
You are Locked On Tigers POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Detroit on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody. Happy to have you along for this live edition of the Locked On Tigers POSTCAST. My name is Jake Riepma. I'm your host. You can follow me or unfollow me on X, Twitter, whatever it's called, at Jake_Riepma. And when you play 162 games every now and then, you've got a couple of snoozers. This one was for the first 5 innings, that's for sure. But as seems to be the case with this team, the bats find a way to, I'll use air quotes, come alive late with single runs in the 6th, 7th, and 8th to make it somewhat of a close game and exciting there in the 9th, down just 1 run. But ultimately, Tigers come up short, 4-3. Twins get the win. On today's show, we're going to break down the concern level of this offense, another slow start, 13 consecutive retired to begin the game by Bailey Ober, and some concerns with the defense. Now 9 errors in their last 4 games from a team that entered the series with one of the best defensive efficiency rates in all of the majors, and we'll round it out with studs and duds. So buckle up, dial it in, fired up to be with you. But before we go any further, how about a shout out for today's presenting sponsor, Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. Use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB. Don't be using those capital letters. LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 at Locked On MLB at prizepicks.com. So there you have it, with the Tigers losing to the Minnesota Twins. That evens the series at 1, the weekend series. And as I mentioned, for the Twins, it was a much needed win for them after they had dropped 5 straight after losing the series opener, coming off the sweep of the Baltimore Orioles. And of course, before that, the Tigers evened up that 4-game series at Comerica Park by winning the last game. So let's talk a little bit about the slow start that this offense continues to be on, both in general and just slow starts to every game. You know, this Tigers offense does not score runs until later in the inning. And Bailey Ober, a guy that we saw just a few games ago, so this is his first start since he started against the Tigers again at Comerica Park, and he either had magnificent stuff or this Tigers offense was just sleepwalking through their at-bats in the first 5 innings, and maybe a little bit of both. I had legitimate thoughts that we might see a no-hitter, and I don't know where you fall on the don't mention the no-hitter, the jinx, and I think that's one of the many hilarious unwritten rules of baseball. I think if you're watching the game and you want to throw out there, hey, there's a no-hitter through 5. I mean, there's 0, I believe their announcer, whoever it is, tweets, whatever, has 0 impact on the game. And if you're in the game, you don't want to talk to the pitcher that's got a no-hitter, of course, that all makes perfect sense. But finally, Matt Vierling broke up the no-hitter in the 5th. And some of the Tigers at-bats from the 5th inning on, I made some notes that it wasn't all bad. So I want to start with our concern level, because I think both with the conversation of the offense and the defense, there's reasons to be concerned, but you can also point to plays where you say, all right, pump the brakes a little bit. It was an off day for the offense, and they still hung around. And at the end of the day, you were in the position in the 9th inning where one swing of the bat could tie the game. And that last batter of the game, Parker Meadows, nearly did just that, as the fly ball to right was caught on the warning track. But let's go through some of the observations I had with this offense. I thought the game was lost by the Tigers in the 7th inning after Vierling got his 2nd hit of the game, and a really good at-bat by the call-up Buddy Kennedy. He's up, obviously, for the injured Gio Urshela, who went to the disabled list, just the 10-day disabled list with the hamstring tweak in last night's game. And really good at-bat by him, Buddy Kennedy, that is, drawing the walk And then you got the double from Javi Baez. So here I go saying something nice about Javi Baez. That's going to be a segment one of these days is Jake, say something nice about Javi Baez. And we'll get to the defensive play he made in a little bit here, because that certainly was noteworthy as well. But the double and then the misplay put runners at second and third with just the one out. Tigers then were down just 2. You had the tying run at second, 1 out, and you just got back-to-back at-bats that were just not big league at-bats. Parker Meadows, just an absolutely terrible at-bat to be swinging at the first pitch and pop it straight in the air to the third baseman for an out without that run scoring. Because anybody that knows baseball, and that doesn't know baseball, anything in between, my niece knows that you got to run right at third with 1 out. You got to find a way to score that run. And the Tigers didn't do that in the 7th. And, I do like, obviously, the pinch hitting move by A.J. Hinch to put Mark Canha up in that situation in the 7th inning, second and third, 2 outs. Would have liked to see a little bit better at bat from Canha. He ultimately gets blown away and strikes out on a fastball in which he expanded the zone. But nonetheless, Tigers offense at least showed some signs of life there. And I think a lot of those signs of life you have to point to none other than Wenzel Perez. And I wrote down he's provided a spark for this team. And look at last night as well. He had the triple last night and another triple again today. So triples in back-to-back games by him. Overall, he's had 3 runs batted in the first 2 games of this series, 2 more today with 2 runs scored. Nice play in the field as well, which we'll talk about during the defensive portion of this segment. But the bottom line is Wenzel Perez is making the most of his time in the bigs for that call up for the injured Andy Ibanez. And I like what he's provided. I don't know how sustainable it is, but in a very, very small sample size, you can certainly point to Perez as being a positive spark for this Tigers team offensively. And now some mistakes he made last night defensively, but another nice catch in right field in this afternoon's game. Other one that I pointed out, the top of the 6th inning to get the run from a 2-out walk by Riley Green. Another quiet game from Riley Green, but you look at his stat line. Yes, no hits, but he scored 2 runs because he was able to get on base twice. 2 walks from Riley Green, get him on base twice, and he comes around to score in both of those. And Kerry Carpenter, got to talk about him because he has been a source of the offense. So despite this Tigers offense being asleep for the majority of the game, Kerry Carpenter has himself another big clutch RBI hit for the Tigers as part of that 1-run 7th inning that, again, cut the lead down to 4-2. Then you get 1 more in the 8th, and all of a sudden you had a chance to win in the 9th with tying it with 1 swing of the bat. Obviously, that didn't happen, but Kerry Carpenter has been on a tear. He was hitting better than 400 with 6 extra base hits in his last 9 games coming into play today, and he continued that with another RBI single here tonight or this afternoon for the Tigers. So not going to get too fired up with some of the things that we saw on the offensive side as far as poor plate approaches. But like I mentioned, I think that game was certainly lost in the 7th inning for the Tigers after they get second and third on the Baez double that cut the lead down to 2 runs. You had second and third in the 7th and were unable to make it happen. And I'm sorry, that Kerry Carpenter hit was in the 8th. But point being, Tigers lose 4-3. Let me know what you think the concern level should be with the offense. And I don't want to be as declarative as say, hey, there's been enough of a sample size. We know that this offense is terrible, but I'm getting close to that. And yes, getting to the end of the calendar month in April here, and I don't know if it's fair to say that, look, there is no possibility of this offense ever turning the corner, because I think we've seen enough signs that even though it's always been late in games, this offense can come to life. And when I will say, when it was 4-0, I felt like the Tigers were out of the game, and this offense proved that wasn't the case because more and more steady work from the bullpen, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But this bullpen certainly has been the strength of the team, the best bullpen in all of the bigs. But let's talk about the defense right now, because that's 9 errors in the last 4 games. So I'll start with the negative, that error by Torkelson in the 5th on what could have been an inning-ending double play. And when you play these tight games, when your offense doesn't, if you're a member of the Detroit Tigers, like we've talked about with this pitching staff, you can't let these games get away as far as the run differential early, because you're out of it at that point. And I felt like the Tigers were out of it 4-0. And the fourth run was that the third run in which Spencer Torkelson had the inning-ending double play go right between his legs. Now, it was a hard-hit ground ball, but those are plays that have to be made. And the margin for error being so small like it is for this Tigers defense, you can't make those errors and expect to win these games, because the offense just isn't potent enough to overcome those mistakes. So while there were a lot of really good plays defensively, that's now 9 errors in the last 4 games. So my concern level is growing right there. I've got it at about a 7 out of 10. What do you say? Let me know down in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're catching the audio only version. Let me know what you think, your concern level with this Tigers defense, because another error by Spencer Torkelson in the 5th that could have been an inning-ending double play. But to be fair, I will be fair, that diving double play made by Javi Baez and Colt Keith in the 4th inning was one of the better double plays you will see. So they deserve a lot of credit on that. Let's be fair. Nice play by Javi Baez at the shortstop position. Now, he also had a stop on a ball in the hole that he did you skip it over to the first baseman because of the distance of the throw, and Torkelson let that get by him as well. It was a tough hop, but Torkelson usually pretty sure-handed at fielding those scoops or scooping the ball at first base, and he just wasn't again today. So tough day for Spencer Torkelson defensively. And Riley Green defensively made a tremendous catch in the 2nd inning, albeit it was a sacrifice fly because there was a wild pitch from Reese Olson that allowed Buxton to get to 3rd. And so even though Riley Green made that diving catch in the 2nd, it was a sac fly for Willie Castro. But this was one of those games that you look at the box score, you see the error, you think maybe the defense didn't play all too well, but that was one isolated play by Spencer Torkelson and some other really, really good plays in the field. We talked about the Wenzel Perez diving catch in the 9th in right. That saved 2 runs and showed the athleticism that Perez can bring to the corner outfield at the right field position. So overall, because of the last 4 games sample size with the 9 errors, I am relatively concerned, but I think you look to some of those phenomenal plays defensively that save some runs, and you think, okay, this is still, it's a strength of the team, but with that, it can also be frustrating because you know what this defense is capable of. You can't let the guard down and make those silly errors like Spencer Torkelson did today. So that said, let me know what you think down in the comments. A couple of people tuning in right now. We've got Dan. Oh, it's my buddy Dan Fidroy. What is going on? Glad to see you tuning in here on the YouTube stream like that. Offensively, what's it going to take to turn the corner? Listen, that's a great question. And I think offensively, what it's going to take is more guys with an effective plate approach and understanding what they can do. We saw it a couple of times today. Riley Green drew a couple of walks, but that needs to be universal 1 through 9 because you got guys going up there hacking. Spencer Torkelson's power has not shown up yet. That's an element of concern. Does not have a home run. And really, Kerry Carpenter, the only guy that's hitting with some kind of power in the lineup for the Tigers. And Wenzel Perez has been a spark coming up from the minor league. So maybe it is turning into the AAA roster. We've talked about guys like Jace Young. We've talked about Akil Baddoo, who is putting up good numbers in AAA. Maybe that's the answer, to call some guys up and maybe insert some energy, insert some life into this Tigers lineup. But appreciate everybody tuning into this edition of the Locked On Tigers postcast after a 4-3 loss to the Minnesota Twins. Coming up, we will break down the Reese Olson start. And although he gets the tough luck loss, I thought he pitched really, really well. That's coming up in just a bit. But right now, I'm fired up to tell you guys all about FanDuel making today's show possible. That's right. FanDuel knows it's playoff time in the NBA. The NHL playoffs start today. How about that, sports fans? And baseball is in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right. Just for signing up as a new customer, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Reese Olson starts today and gave his team a chance to win. He goes 5 innings, gave up 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 4 strikeouts, and 2 walks. Now he does get the tough luck loss. He's now 0-3 on the season, but that doesn't really concern me. I think, like we've said on this program before, he's a bona fide starter in the major leagues. And today, he didn't have his best stuff. And you got to give the Twins some credit for their situational hitting, because all 4 runs for the Twins came in what I would just classify as very anticlimactic fashion. You know, it wasn't an exciting way to score 4 runs. They just had several productive at-bats to move runners over to third, get runners to third with less than 2 outs, and then the 3 sacrifice flies and the other run go on the air by Spencer Torkelson. So that said, I think this Tigers defense, if you look at some of the air that Spencer Torkelson made, they didn't give they didn't give Reese Olson the support that he needed in that 5th inning, in which Minnesota got 2, because if that's an inning-ending double play, obviously we're talking about a totally different game. But if ifs were fifths, we'd all be, intoxicated, and that's just not the way it works. So no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That air from Spencer Torkelson was extremely costly. But Reese Olson, another nice start for him. And if you look at his stats over the course of the entire season for 2024, it's one of those things in which he hasn't had that start. That was his 4th start of the season where he just completely wows you, per se. In fact, he was unfortunately on the wrong end of that 1-0 loss to the Texas Rangers back on April 15th. He did get knocked around in his start against Pittsburgh, and he really didn't fool anybody in that start, in which the Tigers lost 7-4. And then again, he was the starter in that game all the way back on April 1st against the Mets that the Tigers ended up pulling out in extra innings. But each one of his starts, he's shown the ability to weather the storm at times, pitch around guys. That start, even in Pittsburgh, he only went 4 1/3. But based on his numbers here this afternoon, it was a start that he gave his team a chance to win. And I'm not going to, scream into the microphone when a guy goes 5 innings and gives up 3 runs like Reese Olson did. In this case, I just believe he was really let down by that Tigers defense. And you could also say that the Tigers defense made some plays behind him. But what's also important to note from today's game, it was another excellent performance by the bullpen. That's right. The Tigers bullpen entered as the best in the bigs in several different categories. You look at the categories in which this Tigers bullpen led major leagues today. 1.67 ERA over the course of 75 2/3 inning pitch, allowed just 14 earned runs. The 1.00 whip was the best in the bigs, and the opponent batting average all the way down to $171. And once again, really, really impressive here this evening against the Minnesota Twins. That bullpen comes in first with Joey Wentz, who did a good job of pitching an inning and 2/3, did not give up a run. And then Alex Lang, an inning and a third. Hopefully Alex Lang is back to himself after a couple of rocky outings earlier in the season. His last 2 times out, he has been absolutely lights out. And I've always been an Alex Lang guy, so I'm hoping that he is kind of shaken off those that early rust of the season and is back to himself, because he can be an absolute weapon out of the bullpen, like the entire Tigers bullpen can. So Wentz coming in a spot that was, I don't want to say, no pressure, because anytime you're coming in as a bullpen guy, obviously the expectation is to keep the opponent off the scoreboard, and Joey Wentz did just that with 1 2/3. And if he can long reliever guy in this bullpen, and then, like I said, Alex Lang going an inning and a third without giving up a run. So once again, that's three more scoreless innings for the Tigers bullpen, which continues to be the strength of this team. All right, when we come back, we're going to wrap it up with studs and duds. Don't go anywhere. We continue on with this edition of the Locked On Tigers Postcast. All right, today's show is made possible by Prize Picks. That's right. Prize Picks is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's also America's #1 fantasy app with more than 3 million members. I'm one of them. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch those winnings roll in. You got to get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during the NBA postseason. That's right, they are underway. Prize Picks has something for every single sports fan, from baseball and basketball to League of Legends and everything in between. It's the best way to get in on the action on sports. More than 30 states across the country. That includes California, Texas, and Georgia. You want to play along some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean? How about it? You can find that on the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries each and every week on Prize Picks. So how about that? You got to get in on the action. It's real simple. You pick more, you pick less. It's that easy. So download the app, use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, you got to download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. On the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Final portion of the program, we wrap it up with my studs and duds for today. And I normally don't love talking about the opposition. This is Locked On Tigers Postcast, not Locked On Twins, but you got to give the tip of the cap to Bailey Ober, the Twins starter today, who retired the first 13 Tigers he faced. Also had a span of striking out 5 in a row going into the 5th inning. And again, in a game in which the offense didn't show up until later, he was extremely dominant. And I also think that when you see a team on back-to-back games, there's both the option of, hey, what did I learn from that last start that's fresh in my mind? And there's the thought from the offensive side is, what mistakes did the pitcher make in that previous start, and how can we correct it? It's kind of a test match, and Bailey Ober certainly had the better of the Tigers this afternoon. So he gets the stud nod from me, and hopefully the next time the Tigers face him, he doesn't retire the first 13 batters to begin. Also, how about a stud in Wenzel Perez? You could really give this to him for the entire weekend thus far, because he's been really, really good. He had another RBI today. He had the dive in right field in the ninth to keep the score at bay in a 1-run game. And that turned out to be a really impressive play because it would have scored 2 runs. Overall, 3 for 5, 2 RBI, and 2 more runs scored. And the guys on the broadcast kind of joked about this with Dan Dickerson calling play-by-play on the telecast today with Jason Benetti in Ann Arbor at the Big House for the Michigan spring game. But Dickerson and Craig Monroe kind of talked about when you are up for an injured player, you're being called up from AAA, like Perez is up for the injured Andy Ibanez, and you have that opportunity to make an impact, make your presence known. You can't squander those opportunities, and Wenzel Perez has done just that. He's been really, really good in a very short amount of time. And I know he made the mistake in right field, or you could even point to Meadows as the center fielder needing to take charge more, call the youngster off yesterday. But I don't want to dwell on that. I want to look at the diving catch he made today. I want to look at the 2 triples he's had and 3 more hits again today. The 2 runs batted in, 2 runs. These are instances in which a young guy recognizes his opportunity, seizes the moment, and makes the most of that. And for Wenzel Perez, certainly deserves a tip of the cap as a stud of one of the games. So shout out to him. And it'll be interesting because right now, I mean, you ask me who needs to go down. I look at Colt Keith. I know that he's a very highly touted rookie and there's high expectations for him, but maybe sending him down to get right in AAA would work wonders for him and allow that roster spot then for Perez to stay up with the big league club. I know I saw some chatter on Twitter about Perez playing second base. And look, I certainly don't hate it, especially because Keith has made some errors in recent games where despite what we know he can do at the second base position, he's not doing it right now. And obviously we don't need to go down what his inability at the plate has looked like. So I wouldn't hate that right now if you told me Perez stays up with the big league club and Colt Keith goes down to try to get right and face some AAA pitching. Now, that said, we got to get to the duds portion of today as well. And I got to give Spencer Torkelson the dud, man. He had that costly error, and it's hard to point to just one play in the game and say, this cost us the game. But there's plays that need to be made throughout the course of a baseball game, and that was one of them. He didn't make it. Would have been an inning-ending double play. And that's another error from Spencer Torkelson, who I don't want to call him a liability defensively, but based on the last 4 games, there's been portions of significant times, or there's been significant portions of games where you look at it and think, this is Spencer Torkelson has to be better. He can't make this throw. Or he misses this play. He misses that short hop on the scoop. So he made a really good play. I do have to give him credit. That play he made in the 9th inning last night was really, really impressive. So I'll pump the brakes a little bit on Spencer Torkelson, but he certainly was a dud this afternoon. And at the plate, 0 for 4. He continues to, at times, look lost at the plate, still waiting on that first home run of the season. Averages down to 232. Obi on base percentage at 323. Slugging percentage, not good either. And this is a guy that I don't care if he's young. And there's been talk I've seen on Tigers Twitter that because the offense is so bad, there's more pressure on Spencer Torkelson. And I agree with that, but you were a one-of-one kind of player. You were a first overall pick for a reason, and at some point you have to accept those big expectations and do what you were brought in to do. And I go back to some of the comments that, and this probably isn't fair, but he and Riley Green were on MLB Network early in the season, like the big shots that they are, but the production just hasn't been there from Spencer Torkelson. And hopefully at this point it's a tough April to begin the season, and he can turn it around. We know he was a strong second half player last season. That's when he really got hot, and we started to see those power numbers come into fruition. But right now, Spencer Torkelson is costing this baseball team. He cost him this afternoon in a 4-3 loss. So with the loss, Tigers fall to 11-10, 7-3 on the road. Minnesota ends the 5-game skid. They're now 7-12 on the season and 2-5 at home. Series finale tomorrow. The Tigers will send out Casey Mize on the bump for Detroit. We'll have our Lockdown Tigers postcast as well following the conclusion of that game. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We are on YouTube at Lockdown Sports Detroit. And as always, you can find the audio-only version wherever you get your podcast, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the different sites out there. So make sure you set your alerts as well. Once again, my name is Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma. Always an honor and a privilege to be on the air talking Tigers. Fired up to be with Locked On Detroit this season, bringing you all kinds of Tigers content. Don't forget as well, we've got Locked On Tigers Monday through Friday with Scott Bentley, kind of giving you the deep dive analysis where I just get on afterwards and give you that instant post-game reaction. Either way, it's a nice 1-2 punch of coverage for the Detroit Tigers on Locked On Tigers. So that'll do it for this edition. And we're doing fun facts to close it out. So you see that Detroit Pistons hat. Oh, where is it? There it is, other shoulder. That Detroit Pistons hat, the official 2016 draft. I said I'd go through some of the memorabilia that I've got in the studio with me. And always will have a studio update, makeover, or remodel, revamp, if you will. And if you're listening to the audio version, I apologize. We got a ton of bobbleheads on there. So the Detroit Pistons draft class hat, we got a Lions hat back there, and of course the old English hat as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed today's program. We'll be back tomorrow with more Locked On Tigers postcast. Twins and Tigers in the rubber match of a 3-game weekend series. Tigers got the win in the opener. Twins get the win today, 4-3. And we'll do it all again tomorrow. Until then, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time on Locked On Tigers postcast.